standing by. At this time, all participants are in a listen-only mode until the question and answer portion of today's call. During that time, if you would like to ask a question, please press star one. Today's conference is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. Please continue to stand by. Today's conference will begin in 2 minutes. Thank you. Thank you once again for standing by. As a reminder, at this time, all participants are in a listen-only mode until the question and answer portion of today's call. During that time, you may press star one to introduce your question. I'll now turn the meeting over to Rachel Kraft. You may begin.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Rachel Kraft with NASA's Office of Communications. Engineers completed a cryogenic demonstration test on Wednesday ahead of the next launch attempt for the Artemis I mission. Artemis I is a flight test to launch NASA's Space Launch System rocket and send an uncrewed Orion spacecraft around the moon and thoroughly test the spacecraft systems before missions with crew. We have several folks here today to talk about the recent test and provide an update on current activities. They are Tom Whitmire, Deputy Associate Administrator for Common Exploration Systems Development at NASA headquarters, John Blevins, Chief Engineer for the Space Launch System from NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center, Brad McCain, Vice President and General Manager for Jacobs Space Operations Group, and we also have Mike Bolger, Exploration Ground Systems Program Manager from NASA Kennedy. We will have a few opening remarks from each of our speakers, and then we'll take some questions. Reporters can enter star one on your phone to be entered in the question queue at any time. I do want to also note that teams are keeping a close eye on the weather, and we do also have Mark Berger, Weather Officer with Space Launch Delta 45 here to answer any questions about the weather forecast after our opening remarks. And with that, we'll start with Tom.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. Yeah, we're excited to be here today. There's a lot of things going on. I was privileged enough to be here at Kennedy Space Center for the cryo demonstration test on Wednesday, and it was very interesting. I think we've learned a lot. We made our We accomplished all our primary objectives for the cryo demonstration test. We were able to look at the loading operations. We made a tweak in that, and I think we were successful after that. We did the kickstart. We did the pre-press, and we did a chill down, a stable replenish. And then during all those events, we actually monitored the vehicle and adjusted a few parameters, and that was all actually very successful. So we're excited about that. We have some good experts here. Of course, Dr. Blevins, as you all know, is going to talk a little bit about that. And I just want to make sure people understand Brad McCain. I've known Brad for a little while now. How many shuttle program loading operations did you do, Brad?
Yeah, I did 108 of the 135 shuttle missions, but close to 200 tankings. Cryogenics is where I started.
Yeah, so Brad's our kind of cryogenic expert. He's here to kind of keep us straight and work with John to provide you information. And then Mike Bolger is going to talk a little bit about where we are on the weather. We take this a step at a time. We have to watch weather and incrementally make decisions as we go along. We'll watch the direction, the intensity, and the timing of the weather pattern. We'll make the decisions when we make the decisions. So Mike will talk a little bit about that. But overall, we feel that we really got some great data from the test. We accomplished what we were hoping to accomplish. You saw Charlie talk about it afterwards. We were pretty excited with the information we got from the test. And with that, I'm going to talk it over to Dr. Blevins. He's going to talk to you, too, about it for a second.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for your interest in the rocket. I will report, as Tom said, that we had a very successful tanking test. All of the tanks of the vehicle, all four, fully topped off. We were able to do some things that we won't have to do again, dial in some things that we intended to do even on launch day that were left over from previous wet dress rehearsals. So it was a very successful day. I think all the secondary objectives were actually met, not just the primary objectives. And so it was a really successful tanking test. So I'm glad that we were able to fit that in on Wednesday with weather and everything. Also, the vehicle's looking good. The vehicle's ready for launch attempts coming up. We continue to look at life-limited items. We continue with high-definition cameras to scan over the vehicle to make sure that everything looks good, any of the TPS and all that. We also continue to do walk-downs and just prepare the vehicle for the flight ahead. With that, I'm going to pass it to Brad McCain. As Tom said, he's not just a VP, he's a cryo expert, and so he's here to handle your tanking questions, but really glad to have his expertise the other day in the tanking test. Brad?
And the intensity and the timing. We'll meet again here as soon as we get another weather update, which will be at 5 o'clock today, and we'll meet with Charlie, Mike, and their team, and we'll take a look at that new data. And so we're just taking it a step at a time to see. When Mike mentioned earlier, we'll be making decisions actually fairly soon. And if we have to do one this evening, we will. And if we can wait till tomorrow, we will. And that's just normal standard practice for us.
And Tom, just to add to that, so, why is it Plan A? Well, the cryo test was a success, right? So, in other words, we've got a launch vehicle that is ready to go. And so if we have an opportunity, we would like to launch it on Tuesday. Right now, we don't have a forecast that shows us with winds gusting higher than 74 knots coming across the Kennedy Space Center. So that's our Plan A. But we know we got to pay a lot of attention to it, and we know we got to get the decision right. So we are going to be, again, iteratively collecting that data and then collectively making that decision. And whether it's tonight or whether it's tomorrow, it's going to be data-based, and it's going to be to protect the hardware and to protect this program that we're a part of. But ideally, we're calling it Plan A because the cryo test was a success, and right now we don't have a forecast that violates our weather criteria.
Thanks. Our next question is from Jody Grelnick with CNBC.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, so I'm wondering if weather is the potential threat here, and that's really the only major concern. Is there any chance of earlying it up to like Monday to try to get ahead of that?
No, I can answer that. We don't have the ability to move it up a day. So our opportunity will be the 27th. And that's why we really want to, incrementally look at the conditions of the weather. We'll look at it again today at 5 o'clock and make a decision. And there's different opportunities. If we are able to monitor the situation, we'll just have another conversation and we'll see where we're at. But to answer your specific question, the 27th would be the date that we would continue to target. If for whatever reason we're able to stay at the pad, but the weather doesn't look good on the 27th, then we would go to the October 2nd opportunity. But right now we're mostly focused in on really kind of getting smarter about the weather. I'm not from Florida. Mike is, and so I'm from Washington, D.C., and the way we track weather in Washington, D.C. is we pick up the Washington Post in the morning, we see if it's going to rain this day. And so I actually am always amazed when I'm down here. These folks spend a lot of time here in Florida understanding weather patterns and predictions and directions, and there's different models that they follow, and there's just a lot of information to digest. It's still a tropical depression number 9. It's not a named storm. We really want to continue to try to get as much information as we can so we can make the best possible decision for the hardware. And that's why we're going to wait. We'll have another conversation at 5 today, and we're just kind of taking it a step at a time. But I don't know, Mike, I think that's probably, you've been in here for a long time, that's pretty much standard practice for how we handle these situations.
Yeah, and the other thing is that at this point on Friday, it would be pretty hard to get to that Monday launch with the team has been postured and moving towards Tuesday all along. So I know there were some other range factors and so forth, but at this point, given where we're at, it would be really probably impossible to get to Monday.
Our next question is from Gina Sinceri with ABC News.
Yes, a couple of questions. What exactly are the weather constraints at a possible storm like this, the weather issues for staying at the launch pad? And then what's involved in taking it back to the VIB? I think you said earlier this week it would be 3 days.
So let's see, as far as staying at the pad, the wind, we want to see peak winds, less than 74 knots, and that's kind of the key requirement that we're tracking. Again, the rollback would be forecasted sustained winds less than 40, so that's something that we're paying attention to also. Not sure if I've got any more to add to that.
Yeah, Dr. Blevins, do you have any thoughts? No.
No, I think Mike's got it. We've got a robust design, but we want to protect the vehicle, and so we're just going to look at what the forecast is and the assurance, the percent likelihood of that forecast, and certainly we'll have to make a decision over the next 24 hours.
These vehicles, if you have a higher wind, less than the criteria, then we will keep it at the pad. That's a standard practice for the industry. It's not something you roll back just to roll back. It's we really will look at the weather conditions and make a good decision based on the information we have. And right now it's just too early. All we can tell you is what we know, which is we're going to take another look at 5 and we'll see what we got.
Next up is Jay Blackman, NBC News.
Sorry, I was involved in the earlier screening issue, so if this was answered, I apologize. If the weather precludes you from Tuesday, is there a date that you're looking at, and how would that also affect the Crew 5 launch?
Jake Waring, actually my previous boss, Kathy Leaders, is in charge of the SOMD organization, and so my boss, Jim Free, and Kathy are in constant communications. We're going through all the different scenarios. This latest weather thing is new information for us, so we'll continue to talk back and forth and see where we're at. I think we really want to just take this next step to see where we're at, considering the condition of where we are with the vehicle. And so all I can tell you is we have a process that we've worked through. We look at different scenarios. It's an agency decision. We'll get the right people together within the agency to look at that. And then from us, we're really just trying to get to 5 o'clock today and see what the weather looks like this afternoon. So that's a great question. But I think right now we just want to focus in on where we are in the current situation. But I assure you, we've done this a lot. We've had previous conversations, and we'll make sure Jim and Kathy get together and we'll have that conversation once we get some more data. But we are protecting October 2nd, so it's certainly on the table as a planning date. But we'll also recheck with our folks over on Commercial Crew side.
Thank you. Our next question is from Eric Berger, Ars Technica.
Hi, good afternoon. Thanks for doing this. First of all, clarification, the 74 knots and 40 knots, those are gusts, not sustained winds, right? And then the second question, I guess, is maybe for Tom or John. The earliest reasonable arrival of tropical source winds at Kennedy Space Center sunrise on Tuesday. That's from the National Hurricane Center. So you're saying you just need 3 days, right, to go from tanking and launch configuration to reaching the inside of the VAB? And, if that's on that timeline, your people would be exiting KSC in potentially tropical storm conditions. So I'm just wondering, if tropical storm force winds potentially are there by Tuesday morning, are you really leaving yourself enough time with 3 days from making the decision potentially tomorrow, mid-morning, late afternoon, or afternoon? Thanks.
Hey, this is John Blevins, Eric. On the first one, there is a mixture. No, Mike got it right on the winds there. It is peak gust for the 74.1 at the pad, but it's sustained on the rollout, and those are knots, not miles an hour. And so, the 74.1, just to let you know where that comes from, it comes from the 180-day winds that we record over decades here at the Cape, and it's referenced to a 60-foot high level. And so, no, Mike got that right earlier when he said 74.1 gusts, and then 40 knots sustained on the rollback. We're certified for those. And you could actually slow down the vehicle and probably do more wind on the way back, but we don't want to do that analysis. We want to stay within the parameters that we've kind of set for that.
And then on the second part of the question, it's a delicate balance, right? Earliest possible, perhaps is Tuesday. I think more likely, if in fact this comes at us, the more likely is something along the lines of late Tuesday or Wednesday. We don't want to roll back if we don't have to, and so clearly the uncertainty of this storm makes this a difficult decision and makes the timing difficult as well. It may be that when we get to the 5 o'clock forecast tonight and we look at the forecast, that we feel it's the time to pull the trigger and to go ahead and put the rollback in motion. We hope it's not. We hope that we're going to continue to feel like we've got some more time and that we can push the decision to Saturday morning. Obviously, the safety and health of our workforce is really important to us, and that's a factor in this decision that we make. So clearly, it's not simple. We would like to stay out there, and we were hopeful that, within this launch period, we're going to get another launch attempt, and that's why we're watching the weather so closely.
Our next question is from Emery Kelly, Florida Today.
Hey, folks. Thanks for doing this today. Just kind of a question possibly for John. If a rollback is necessary, and it comes to that point, considering that the fueling test went well and everything hardware-wise is kind of in place and situated, does it make you, I guess, maybe nervous isn't the right word, but nervous to roll back, and then you got to roll back out again and reconnect everything and reseat everything? Does that introduce more points of possible hydrogen or fueling issues later on, or are you pretty confident that the fixes that you saw working this week will kind of hold through a rollback and rollout? Thanks.
Hey, Emery. John Blevins here. Yeah, good questions. First of all, on the rollback, we've talked a lot about rollback, and I think I've expressed my desire not to do too many rolls, just because it is a broadband, a little bit of shaking. Vehicle's certified for more rolls. If we need to do that, we're going to do that. There won't be any, we're going to make a good technical decision on that based on the data, as Mike has said and Thomas said. But if we have to roll back, as far as, yes, we had a great tanking test. I don't think we should take anything away from that. It's another data point, certainly, if we roll back and forth and reconnect to the propellant lines. As far as the umbilical plate itself, where we replace the seal and everything, it stays in that position. I'm not overly concerned. I don't have that data. Let's just be clear. It's still a machine, and there are parameters that we're learning, and I don't think that the roll itself, looking at the frequency of that roll and look at the umbilical and its sensitivity, I don't think it'll have any effect. It's not on, until you asked, it wasn't a big issue. We have talked about it, but it's not something that's specifically on my radar per se as a concern on rollback or rollout. I think the main thing for me is that we did have a great test. We did meet all our objectives, both primary and secondary, and we understand how that seal works. And I think that is the reasons that we were having the issue, not, anything from roll out or roll back. But it's a good question, and certainly if we have to roll out and roll back, there'll be some things that we do change, just some life-limited items that will be coming up in that case. But I'm not concerned about the leak with the roll per se. But good question, Amory. Thank you.
Yeah, this is Tom. Just to add to John's thing, if we do go back to the VAB, we will take that opportunity. We got to do some battery charging. We'll retest the FTS system. We'll do some stuff like that. So it will replace the battery on it. So we have some known things that we will do if we go back into the VAB. And so that's just to be clear. That's what we would.
Okay, thanks. Our next question is from Emily Speck with Fox Weather.
Hey there. My question is for John or maybe Mike. Is there any scenario where it's better to leave SLS at the pad, like even through a tropical storm and a hurricane? You're talking about 74 knots. Like, what is the max that you would potentially want to do that for?
Hey, Emily, that's a really good question. Actually, we're in the middle of conversations about what the best thing to do for the rocket is and hitting the launch opportunity and all of those things, both technical and programmatic, and balancing those. We do have a certified design with factors of safety to those peak gusts at the 60-foot level, and you probably know as well as anybody how that's generated. We have a conservative parabolic profile where all of the 180-day winds fall within that parabolic profile that we apply all the way up the vehicle. So those aren't just 74.1 knots at the 60-foot level. They're very high. I'd have to look it up to see what they are at the top of the vehicle when we evaluate that, and we're certified with factors of safety to do that. I think, and of course, that's primary loads. Your risk could be other things that might be moving around in a storm like that. And so if we actually experience a true hurricane, it'd be my recommendation, that we consider rolling back. Usually the footprint of those things isn't as wide, for those high winds. And so I think really this forecast is really very important to us that we're going to be trying to get more detail on over the next 12 to 24 hours. But ultimately, we have a pretty robust vehicle, and we'll just have to keep looking at that forecast to see if we fall within our certified parameters. Mike?
Yeah, hey, Emily, the first thing I would say is maybe you can help us out with this. We're really looking for that forecast that's going to tell us.
Everybody online has better weather data than we do. It was just we're going to get a really good, highly technical forecast at 5 o'clock. So we'll
kind of just kidding, but what. And I think everybody recognizes that the forecast did change from Wednesday to Thursday to Friday, and so when we woke up this morning and the tracks looked worse than they had the previous 2 days, it really caused us to start to take a long, hard look at exactly what the right decision is, and that's what we're trying to do today. Hopefully, we have seen some trending of the storm, and you know it better than I do, but we've seen some trending of it moving west to east. So, a lot of the models early on showed us going into the Gulf, and they were fairly disparate. We've seen over the past 2 days it moved further to the east. And again, as you know better than I know, until that storm is formed, until we really know where that center is, and until we understand the timing of that trough, there's an uncertainty. If it continues to trend to the east, and it curves, and basically, we stay on the left side of the storm, and it cuts through lower on South Florida, we're going to be in a lot better position. And so, if you were tracking stocks or if you're tracking storms, you've seen this move to the east a couple days in a row, and so maybe we'll see some more of that over the next several hours. And again, very dependent on the forecast that we got at 11, which I haven't seen yet, and the thing that we'll get at 5 o'clock, and we'll make the best risk-informed decision, like John Blevins said, based on technical, based on programmatic, and really, at the end of the day, we know we've got to protect this incredibly valuable asset, and we'll do that.
Our next question
is
I
apologize. I forgot. We've also got Mark Berger on the line. He's not sitting in the room with us, so I should have let him weigh in on that one. My apologies, Mark.
No worries at all, but I think you hit the nail right on the head with that. There's still a lot of uncertainty, and as you mentioned, the track has pushed a little bit farther to the east, so while it is a threat to be watched, certainly, and watched closely, it's one also that we can manage as well.
Our next question is from Chris Gebhardt, NASA Spaceflight.
Hi, yeah, I'm curious from the dual ops here of progressing down to rollback while also preserving and progressing the ops for launch on Tuesday. I'm curious. There was a specific umbilical in the shuttle program that had to be pulled, which would basically break and sever the connections with the ground. Is there a corresponding is there a corresponding cable, a corresponding bundle that once you go beyond that, it's basically like you've taken the vehicle off the pad and you have to redo all of the test connections? What's the equivalent point for that for SLS that you really wouldn't want to go past until you make the decision whether or not to roll? And on the 8-inch quick disconnect, again, I don't think I actually caught the answer to Bill's question, that the SEALs did the exact opposite of what they were supposed to at the beginning. The PAO officer called it a head scratcher, but then they started working. So can you sort of touch on how that is possible? And since you saw varying behavior with them, what is it that gives you confidence going into Tuesday that they're not going to leak in some other new way?
Hey, Chris, this is Brad McKenna. I'll try to answer the first one. I think you were talking on shuttle, the locks and LH2 disconnect towers were connected to the mobile launcher for both commodities. So when you rolled off the pad, you disconnected there. So once everything else stayed connected when you rolled back to the VB. So once you did that and rolled back out, you would have to go ahead and sample the G and 2 helium commodities and then go ahead and redo dew points and things like that before you reconnected. And that took time, as well as do all the electrical connections and umbilicals and things like that. So it took basically reperform your pad validations, which was a day and a half or so of work. So anytime once you disconnected and rolled back to the VB, there was a amount of work you would do there. And as far as the second question on 8-inch QD, the leak signature we saw the second time was different than the first. So totally different signatures. It was also, again, manageable by the way that we controlled the loading. So again, I'm not sure if it was who asked the question earlier. No, we have requirements and specifications and launch commit criteria and things, and that we live by on all these things. So rarely do you get a pristine, perfect system that has from a fluid standpoint, that has no leakage. So throughout the shuttle program, again, I go back on my history. On LH2 systems, we had leakage pretty much every single mission, and you never heard about it because it never violated constraints and never made the headlines. But we'd have 500 parts per million or 1,000 parts per million, and some weren't reported because they never exceeded the limit to report, and some were reported and we took non-conformances but never exceeded safety plans and things like that. So we'll monitor the system and if it exceeds requirements, we'll report them and respond accordingly. But John, I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but.
No, Brad, I don't have anything to add. Good detail.
I guess this is Mike Bolger. The one other part of the question that you asked about, again, what are the things that you can do to get ready, and just a couple things kind of come to mind. We asked our crawler team, hey, let's go make sure we're ready to go. Let's start thinking about when we got to position that crawler, when we want to roll it out towards the launch pad. So they're in the process of doing that. We're taking a look at the condition of the crawler way, making sure it's all ready to go. And so the team is looking at that. And the other things we're talking about are, can we do hurricane preps across other facilities around Kennedy, get those done early and kind of behind us before you might normally even get into them based on the HURCON conditions, so that we can free up as many resources as possible for the actual rollback opportunity and basically compress that timeline and get it done even faster than we otherwise might have. So we are taking a look at things we can do to kind of get ahead of the game, if you will.
Okay, we're going to take two more questions and then wrap up. Our next will be from Marcia Smith with Space Policy Online.
Thanks so much. I was wondering if Dr. Blevins could talk a bit more about how it is that the Space Force was convinced to extend the battery limit. It was a 20-day limit, and you got it extended to 25, and now it's been extended for basically 3 or 4 weeks past that. So what was it that set the 20-day limit, and how were you able to convince the Space Force that, in fact, it's good for many weeks past that. And is this a precedent now? Does this mean that for future launches that use that battery that you no longer will have the 20-day limit?
Hey, Marcia, those are kind of insightful questions. Let me just say the Space Force owns the mission and the analysis, and we do the analysis they request as well as a lot that they do. And so they've done that analysis, and they have confidence in our system for this time. I don't want to go into any details because it's just not pertinent here. To give those kind of details and, would be silly because there's just too many parameters that they look at for anybody to take that information and try to correlate it to anything that makes sense to them. So I'll just say that they've worked with us all along. This is not the first time that we've been working with them. We worked not just during the shuttle program, but on this program for years. So they're involved in evaluating our design, our qualification batteries, in the testing that we do. They sit on console with us, and so they're part of our team. And so they have an incredible mission, and they do a good job at it. And I'm really glad that we had enough information to provide the public safety assurance that they get to grade. And so that's all I've got to say about the FTS.
Okay, thanks, John. And our last question is from Stephen Young with Spaceflight Now.
Hello, Stephen Young with Spaceflight Now. Just to follow up on a few things, and sorry if I might have missed the answers to these during the technical problems. With the FTS certification, what happens if you're not off the ground by the 2nd of October? And for rollback, if you had to do that, do you need to offload the hydrazine for the HPUs on the boosters? And if you do roll back, are we looking at November for the next launch opportunity?
Okay, I'm watching Mike Bolter as I speak right now. Let me take it from the back question to the front question. This is Tom. Our pre-planned approach for hurricane rollback, we do not desurface the HPUs. There's 4 gallons of hydrazine in each one of the power units that we use to power the hydraulics and the boosters, and those will stay in the vehicle as we roll back into the VAB. In terms of our ability looking forward, I don't think we know yet in terms of what our schedule would be looking forward. Like I said, we've got to sort through. We're going to do the FTS battery change out. We're going to do some other battery charging activities. So we'll lay that out when we make a decision to actually roll back into the VAB. And so after that, we'll have a better idea of what our trip back to the pad would look like and what kind of dates we would target for that. Right now, we're literally mostly focused on the current weather reports. We have a lot, the agency has, and the folks here have a lot of practice on really working through those forecasts, working closely with our weather office, and then if we have to move up a decision because of a change, we'll move up the decision. If we have a little bit more time for a decision, we'll take a little more time for the decision. But this was actually fairly standard. I mean, I did the shuttle program for a long time, so I've watched this for myself. I've watched it for quite a while, and we're following the normal procedures, and we'll absolutely make the right call with this vehicle. And we feel that this afternoon we'll have another conversation on that. We're in constant communication with the folks. Mike and Charlie and team are in constant communication, and we just I wish we were better at predicting weather absolutely 5 days in advance, and if I did, I would pretty much quit this job and go work for the Weather Bureau, but there's still some uncertainties in the forecast, and therefore we want to make sure we have an ability to get a little bit better definition, and then when we get that definition, we'll make the right call. I don't think Mike, have any. That's it.
Okay, that's all we have time for today. We did have some technical issues with our live stream for those not initially dialed in. So we will be posting a full recording of this teleconference as soon as we can on our Artemis blog. You can find that at blogs.nasa.gov/Artemis. And we will also be posting additional updates there. And with that, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us.
Thank you for participating in today's conference. All lines may disconnect at this time.